February 9th, 1947. 2:47 a.m. Basement beneath the Red Rooster Club, 138th Street, Harlem. Two men sat in that basement. One was Bumpy Johnson. The other was supposed to die. But Bumpy didn't kill him. And that choice changed everything. The man across the table was named Vincent Russo. He was 32 years old. He worked for the Genovese family. 3 weeks earlier, he had been part of a crew that robbed one of Bumpy's policy banks on Lenox Avenue. They'd taken $14,000. They'd also killed 2 people, a runner named Thomas Webb and a woman who'd been standing outside buying numbers. Thomas Webb had worked for Bumpy for 9 years. The woman's name was Clara Patterson. She was 63 years old. She had nothing to do with anything. The Genovese family had apologized. They claimed it was unauthorized. They offered to return the money. They did not offer Vincent Russo. So Bumpy took him. It had been simple. Russo wasn't important enough to protect and not important enough to start a war over. When Bumpy's men found him outside a bar on Pleasant Avenue, Russo didn't even fight. He knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming. That's how these things worked. You kill someone's people, they kill yours. Balance. Order. Harlem understood this. The basement beneath the Red Rooster was where Bumpy handled private business. Brick walls. Single light bulb. 1 table. 1 chair on each side. The door at the top of the stairs was locked from the inside. Bumpy had been sitting there for 6 minutes. He hadn't said a word. Vincent Russo sat across from him, hands on the table, trying not to shake. A revolver lay on the wooden surface between them, closer to Bumpy's side, but not in his hands. Just there. Present. Upstairs, the Red Rooster was still open. Music filtered down through the floorboards. Sarah Vaughan on the jukebox. People drinking, talking, dancing. Life continuing normally while 2 men sat in a basement deciding whether one of them would leave it alive. Russo finally spoke. His voice cracked on the first word. "I didn't know about the woman." Bumpy didn't respond. Didn't blink. Didn't move. "I swear to God, Mr. Johnson. I didn't know she was there. Paulie, he just started shooting. I tried to pull him back but—" "Stop talking." Russo's mouth snapped shut. Bumpy's voice had been quiet. Not a shout. Not a threat. Just 2 words, delivered with the weight of absolute authority. Silence filled the basement again. The light bulb hummed. Somewhere above them, glasses clinked. Someone laughed. Russo was sweating now, dark patches spreading under his arms despite the February cold seeping through the brick walls. He looked at the gun. Then at Bumpy's hands still flat on the table. Then at Bumpy's face, trying to read something, anything, in that expression. He found nothing. Bumpy Johnson was 41 years old. He'd been running Harlem for 15 years, not through violence, though he was capable of it, but through something more permanent. Order. Structure. The understanding that Harlem worked a certain way and Bumpy decided what that way was. He didn't make threats. He didn't need to. Everyone already knew what happened when you disrupted the order he maintained. Vincent Russo knew. That's why he was shaking. This moment mattered. Bumpy reached into his jacket pocket. Russo flinched. But Bumpy pulled out a pack of Chesterfields. He took 1 cigarette, lit it with a silver lighter, and set the pack on the table beside the gun. He smoked in silence for 30 seconds. Ash grew on the cigarette. He tapped it into his palm, closed his fist, and let it fall to the floor. Then he spoke again. The Genovese family apologized. It wasn't a question, but Russo nodded anyway. They returned the money. Another nod. But they didn't give you up. You understand what that means? Russo's voice came out as a whisper. They don't care if I die. No, Bumpy said. They don't care if you die. But they care if I kill you here, in this basement, after they apologized. That starts a conversation they don't want to have. He took another drag from the cigarette. So you're alive right now because of politics. Not because you deserve to be. Not because I'm merciful. Because the cost of killing you is higher than the cost of Thomas Webb and Clara Patterson. Russo said nothing. What could he say? That's the calculation. Bumpy continued. That's how this works. You understand that? Yes, sir. Bumpy studied him for a long moment. Then he did something Vincent Russo did not expect. He stood up. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just stood, buttoning his suit jacket with one hand, cigarette in the other. The gun stayed on the table. Russo didn't move. Didn't know if he should move. Didn't know if standing meant he was dismissed or if Bumpy was about to walk around the table and finish this personally. Bumpy walked to the stairs. He stopped with his hand on the railing. You're going to leave Harlem, he said, his back to Russo. Tonight. You're going to tell the Genovese family that you're done with this life. You're going to move somewhere they don't operate. Chicago, maybe. Detroit. Somewhere far. He turned his head slightly, not quite looking back. And if I ever hear your name again, if you ever come back to New York, if you ever work for any family in any capacity, if you ever so much as think about Harlem, I will find you. And next time, there won't be politics to consider. He started up the stairs. Wait, Russo said, his voice desperate. Why? Why are you letting me go? Bumpy stopped. For 3 seconds he didn't respond. Then, because everyone in Harlem needs to know something. He looked back down the stairs, his face half in shadow. I don't have to kill you to destroy you. Subscribe and leave a comment. The most important part of this story is still ahead. Bumpy walked out of the basement. The door closed behind him. The lock didn't click. Vincent Russo sat alone at the table with the revolver still lying there, untouched. He sat there for 7 minutes before he found the courage to stand. His legs barely held him. He walked to the stairs, climbed them slowly, pushed the door open. The Red Rooster was still full. Music still playing. Nobody looked at him. Nobody cared. He walked through the crowd, out the front door, into the February cold. He was on a bus to Chicago by dawn. He never returned to New York. He never worked for any crime family again. He got a job in a factory, married a woman from Indiana, had 3 children, and died of a heart attack in 1973. He never told anyone about the basement. About sitting across from Bumpy Johnson. About the gun on the table that was never touched. But word got out anyway. Not from Russo. From someone else who'd been upstairs that night. Someone who saw Russo leave alive. The story spread through Harlem like smoke. Bumpy Johnson had let a man live. A man who'd killed 2 people. A man who deserved to die by every code that governed their world. He'd let him live. And in doing so, he'd sent a message more powerful than any execution could have delivered. This decision would affect everyone. The message was simple. Bumpy Johnson didn't need violence to maintain control. Violence was for people who had no other options. Bumpy had options. He had patience. He had political weight. He had the ability to make a man's life meaningless without ending it. Letting Vincent Russo walk out of that basement alive demonstrated something the other crime families hadn't fully understood until that moment. Bumpy operated on a different level. The Genovese family had expected a body. They'd prepared for it. They had their response planned, a quiet countermove, maybe a minor retaliation against one of Bumpy's lesser operations, just to save face. Then everyone would move on. But Bumpy gave them nothing to respond to. No body. No murder. No violation of their truce. Just a man who left Harlem and never came back. That was more unsettling than violence. Violence they understood. Violence had rules. This mercy that felt like a threat, this decision that destroyed a man without touching him, they didn't have a framework for it. Within a week, 3 different Italian families sent envoys to Harlem. Not to threaten. Not to negotiate territory. To establish communication lines. to make sure Bumpy knew they respected his authority. The black community in Harlem responded differently. They saw something else in the story. Clara Patterson's daughter, Marie, had demanded justice. She'd gone to the police, who did nothing. She'd gone to the NAACP, who sympathized but had no jurisdiction over mob activity. She'd finally gone to the Red Rooster and asked to speak to Bumpy Johnson. She never got the meeting. But 2 days after Russo left New York, an envelope appeared under her apartment door. Inside was $3,000 in cash and a note written in careful handwriting. Your mother's life had value. This doesn't replace her. But it feeds your children while you grieve. No signature. No explanation. Just money and acknowledgement. Marie took the money. She used it to bury her mother properly, to take a month off work, to keep her 3 children fed and clothed. She never knew where it came from officially, but she knew. Everyone in Harlem knew. Bumpy had collected a debt the Genovese family didn't even know they owed. And he'd paid it forward to the person who mattered. That story spread too. Alongside the story of Vincent Russo walking out alive. 2 stories. 1 decision. A message to the mob, I don't need your violence. And a message to Harlem, I don't forget our dead. This was the moment people would remember. The basement beneath the Red Rooster became part of Harlem mythology. People would reference it in whispers. Remember what happened with the Italian kid? As shorthand for Bumpy's particular kind of power. Younger men trying to make names for themselves would study the decision. Some thought it was weakness. They were wrong. Most of them ended up learning that lesson personally. One in particular, a young enforcer named Calvin Brooks, decided Bumpy was getting soft. He made moves without permission, started talking about how the old ways were done, how Harlem needed new leadership. Bumpy didn't confront him. Didn't threaten him. Didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, every business Calvin tried to run dried up. Every connection he tried to make got warned off. Every move he made to expand his influence hit invisible walls. Within 3 months, Calvin Brooks was broke, isolated, and completely powerless. He left Harlem owing money to people who wouldn't forget. Bumpy never spoke his name. Never acknowledged his existence. Just removed him from the board like he'd never been there. That was the lesson of the basement. Violence was easy. Any thug could pull a trigger. But making a man irrelevant, making him disappear without killing him, that required real power. The kind of power Bumpy had spent 15 years building. The police noticed too. Detective William Parker had been investigating Bumpy for years, trying to build a case that would stick. He knew about the basement meeting. He knew Vincent Russo had been there and left alive. Parker couldn't figure out the angle. In his experience, mob bosses killed people who crossed them. That's what they did. The fact that Bumpy hadn't killed Russo bothered him more than if there'd been a body. He's playing a different game, Parker told his partner. And we don't know the rules. They never did figure it out. Bumpy Johnson would operate in Harlem for another 20 years before the law finally caught up with him. And even then, it was for something unrelated, something small, something that had nothing to do with the empire he'd built. The basement beneath the Red Rooster stayed exactly as it was that night. Same table. Same chairs. Same light bulb. Different men sat there over the years. Different conversations happened. Different decisions were made. But everyone who sat in that basement knew the story. Knew what happened in February 1947. Knew that Bumpy Johnson had held a man's life in his hands and chosen something more valuable than revenge. He chose legacy. Share and subscribe. This is how stories like this survive. Vincent Russo died in Chicago in 1973. His children never knew what their father had done before they were born. Never knew about the basement. Never knew about the gun on the table. But in Harlem, they remembered. When Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, the story of the basement was told at his funeral. Not by a preacher. By an old man who'd been there that night, upstairs at the Red Rooster, who'd seen Russo walk out alive. He didn't have to kill to be feared, the old man said. He just had to decide. The revolver from that table stayed in Bumpy's possession until he died. It was never fired. He kept it in a drawer as a reminder. Power isn't what you do. It's what you choose not to do. Harlem understood that. The families understood that. Even the police, eventually, understood that. Bumpy Johnson let one man live. And that decision made him untouchable.